Call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. It is Thursday, October 19th, time is 6:35 p.m. We're going to listen to some proposals tonight, Mr. Donovan.
Yes,
Present from the committee is Mr. Kaufman and myself, and also present is Mr. Farrington. Ready?
Mr. Donovan and Mr. Smith.
Yeah, they're here.
They're here too.
Yes, so we have three firms coming tonight to talk about energy performance contracting work. Our first one is a firm, a local firm, I believe. EEI, I keep wanting to call them WEEI, but
We'll go with
not a radio station. So I will, Sean, do you have any words you want to say, or?
Oh, just as you recall, we've been at this for almost a year, and we had originally 9 companies that we presented proposals. And I'm just coming off a cold case. So we've reduced that to the 3 that you'll hear tonight, and they're here to give their presentations, and hopefully we'll end up selecting one of them soon.
You ready? So, first of all, my name is Mike Davey. I am the project manager with EEI, and I just would like to thank you for having us get to this point. We are a local company. Our headquarters is in Merrimack, New Hampshire. We're about 3 miles from Nashua North, so we're very familiar with the buildings. The project supervisor that we proposed from this project, George St. Amant, is a Nashua resident, longtime resident who sent his children to these schools and was the lacrosse coach during some of the winning years. And as part of our team, so we have a team approach. We have Chris Claridi from Control Technologies, and in case you aren't aware, Control Technologies currently does the building automation system at 13 of the schools here in the school district, and they've been your controls partner for 17 years doing energy management. They are also a Manchester-based company, a local firm that knows every inch of your school districts, and we thought this team approach was the best potential solution for Nashua. You have your incumbent controls company that knows every inch of all your buildings. We worked with them to come up with some ideas for energy savings, and then we are a local company that our owner is from Hollis. I'm from Manchester, so we know that we have the great contractor relationships in the area, and specialize in getting grants and rebates working with New Hampshire schools. EEI was founded in 1987 by the owner of our company, who, like I said, was from Hollis. In fact, his father, who just passed away last week, was the state rep from Hollis for over 20 years. So we have a long standing tradition here in the area. And Control Technologies, like I said, almost 17 years working in your district, and strong recommendations, I think, from all the facility managers that they work with on the Nashua side. Sean can probably speak to that more than we can.
I would say, this scope of work right now is for the 2 high schools, and CTI has both of them for controls.
So before I tell you any more about us or what we want to do for Nashua, I often find that it's useful to talk a little bit about just what performance contracting is, in case board members haven't gone through this process before. So in general, a performance contract is a construction project in which the energy savings help pay for all of the improvement over time. It's very common for school districts, because rather than, for example, if you had a $2 million project, rather than having to put $2 million in the budget, the projects can be structured so that they're tax neutral, meaning that they're financed over time, and that the energy savings either offset the finance payment, or sometimes the energy savings are in excess of, so it's revenue positive for the budget. So they've been very popular, and state law allows you to do projects that pay for themselves up to 20 years. And I copied the state law just in case anyone was curious. I won't read it, but it's here in the presentation. And knowing what a performance contract it is, so energy savings to pay for improvements, one of the questions that, before you decide to select someone to work with, is does a performance contract make sense for Nashua? So that's one of the things that we looked at. We know you wanted to hear from us today, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to do a performance contract. What we did is we took the energy usage from Nashua North and Nashua South High School. And then we said, how much energy are you using per square foot? And then we want to compare that to what some of your peers are using per square foot. So this is just a baseline snapshot, 5,000 foot view. How energy efficient on a square foot basis are you compared to your peers? So for example, electricity is in kilowatt hours, is measured in kilowatt hours and billed. Gas is in therms. And so it's sometimes hard to compare. So you can convert all those different units, and for example, Keene High School is in oil, and Plymouth High School is wood chip. You can convert all those things to a common unit, which is BTUs, or I've broken it down to KBTUs, which is 1,000 BTUs. So right now, just based on your 2016 data, Nashua North used 72 KBTUs per square foot, and Nashua South uses 61 KBTUs per square foot. And you may say, why the difference? These are identical buildings and almost the same square footage. My understanding from looking at the numbers is the more summer programs typically are at one school versus the other, and they rotate that. So the electrical usage on average is going to be higher every year, alternating one versus the other. So I compared that to some of the schools we've been working with. Manchester School District, so we are the energy performance contractor for all of the 22 schools in the city of Manchester. And Central High School, Memorial, and West, on average, are about 30% less energy usage per square foot. West and Memorial are a little less, and Central is a little more. Keene High School is about 38% more energy efficient on a per square foot basis. And Plymouth High School, where we did and Plymouth High School is different. That's the only one up here where we did a comprehensive performance contract. At Central, Memorial, West, and Keene, we've done some projects, but not jumped into everything. Plymouth High School was a candidate where a lot of the equipment was at the end of life. They want the board and the facilities team was very proactive in wanting to do everything they could to make it as efficient as possible. And so post our project, that building is 53% more energy efficient on a square foot basis than the Nashua high schools.
How old was that building?
That building was it 1970s?
1970s, then there was an early 70s and then a late 70s renovation.
Now, in some, it's not fair just to compare these buildings just on these metrics. Because, for example, it could be that you run more summer programs than Plymouth does. Plymouth is a little further north than you, so they may have more heating and you may have more. So it's not exact. I can't tell you, yes, we can reduce your cost by 53%. What this is a metric to say, is there an opportunity for savings? And based on the global view and our walkthrough, there is a huge opportunity to reduce energy consumption at these two schools. And just from a macro, if we could get the KBTUs per square foot equal to Manchester schools, that would result in a $275,000 per year in energy savings. If you could really hit a home run and target everything, its potential, if you could get to that Plymouth level, you'd be at $685,000 in annual energy savings. So that the Plymouth is sort of an extreme example because in that project we did new boilers, new controls, retro commissioning, and in fact George will hand out a report, and if there's time I would love to show you how those savings in Plymouth were achieved. That's this one.
Oh, that one, okay. Well,
So that's from a macro standpoint. I would say that there's good evidence before we do a detailed audit that there is substantial opportunity for savings. And as I'm going through this, if you have questions, just fire them off at me.
How did you get more than double the savings in Plymouth when it goes from a 30% savings to a 53?
That's a variance. And it's in so the what we did is we said in general if we took your numbers, and this is where you go from percentage of fuel to the types of fuel.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's, all right.
you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's not as simple. You use a lot more gas, and gas is a different BTU than electric. So that's why those numbers are different. And again, that's a macro. It's just telling you that those schools, on average, are significantly more efficient than, not necessarily more efficient, use significantly less energy. It may be that you have that many more programs in them, and that's the type of thing we would dive deeper into
Yep.
through this process. Oh, and why do a performance contract? There's lots of reasons schools do it. One is just to reduce your energy and potentially focus on the best paybacks. Others is to replace obsolete or poorly functioning equipment. So sometimes you go to a building that has a failed control system, or the boiler's at the end of life, or the air handler's it needs to be replaced. And boards oftentimes like to tie together something that it may have no payback or very minimal payback to take an air handler off and put a new. But if you combine that with lighting or controls, sometimes you can create a project where it's tax neutral. You get the new air handler, and then the better, they call it low-hanging fruit in the energy industry, the lighting and the VFD drives might pay for the improvements. There are also, sometimes they want turnkey companies to manage this process for them. 4 and 5 are opposites. One is to do targeted projects, and one is to do comprehensive projects. So in Manchester, they had us do a comprehensive audit, meaning we looked at everything that could be done, but then Manchester only had $3 million to spend and we identified more than $12 million in potential projects. So what they did is they targeted the best paybacks with the biggest needs. So they said we needed, the air handler at Central High School gym was from 1967, that had to go. The payback was probably minuscule compared to the cost of the equipment, but they married it with new lighting at Central High School gym and VFD drives here and there to create a blended project that was actually cash positive for the school district in the city.
VFD.
It's a variable frequency drive. So a lot of times in construction pre-2005, you would put in a pump or a fan, and you would, for example, let's just say Nashua North Gym. It's a 10,000 CFM, meaning 10,000 CFM of outside air comes in, and it's designed for when you're holding a playoff basketball game, meaning if you have whatever the capacity is, 300 people, 400 people in that gym, you need enough outside air so that it's not a hot stuffy mess in there. And so what happened is original engineers would put in a fan, and it would just run at that speed year round, because you had to be designed to bring in air when you really needed it. The technology that's come out earlier than this, but 2005 really became popular from the energy codes, is to put in a variable speed drive. And what that allows you to do is, based on feedback from the space, you can actually reduce that fan power. So that's actually one of the projects we've targeted here, is that in some of the gyms, we can put in CO or CO2 sensors, which measures how many people are in the space breathing. And then as more people come in, we ramp the fan up. But if there's a very few people, just a gym class of 20 people, there's huge savings. We did one high school in Lawrence, and the savings of putting that drive in and modulating the outside air was, I think, an $8,000 savings just in that gym. Because if you think about it, if that unit is running at 100% most of the time, you're heating that air or cooling that air, and your average gym class might have 30 kids in it, but it's designed for the, so that's where variable speed drives on big equipment can have a huge savings. That the payback doesn't scale down. So if you have a pump in your boiler room in your basement at your house, it probably doesn't justify the thousands of dollars it costs to put it on. But when you get these big pieces of equipment, the paybacks are sometimes 1 year or less to put that type of control in. And then sometimes you have projects identified and you need a way to finance them. So the energy savings and the performance contracting model creates ways to finance them. And because we're first, I wanted to give you guys a little background on performance contracting, which I know that we're not talking about how great EI is all the time, but I think it's important to fully get the concept. This is an example of a more targeted project. So this is the Richmond School in Hanover, New Hampshire. Their estimated energy budget was approximately $130,000 for heating and cooling, and so we did a LED retrofit and a few other small energy improvement measures, and they just kept their energy budget fixed the way it was previously, and so the red represents a lease payment or a financing payment, and over 6 years the project paid for itself, and the estimated life on this product is more than 15 years in a school environment. So years 7 through 15, you'll have a savings. So the way these work, the way this example worked, is it was budget neutral for the first X amount of years, then it becomes cash flow positive. In Manchester, it was so big and we were able to generate such savings, it was actually budget positive every year, meaning that there was a lease payment, but the energy savings far exceeded the lease payment, so it was actually budget positive. I've mentioned Manchester a couple.
Mr. Donovan likes that.
Yes. One of the things is, you're going to hear from us, and then you're going to hear from some. We're about a mid-sized local company, and then there are some huge, great companies that you're also going to hear from that are much bigger and publicly traded, and it's probably a difficult decision who to pick. One of the things that I recommend is we do this work for the city of Manchester, Keene, Portsmouth, and Plymouth. And I think when you talk to those facility directors, and they've dealt with both types of companies, they generally really enjoyed working with us. We have a letter of recommendation here from the facility director in the city of Nashua, from the city of Manchester, and he's actually a Nashua resident, and he really strongly enjoyed working with us and allowed us to share that letter, which we can pass around.
No, I cannot share it.
And Plymouth High School, again, this is a project where we'll pass around our savings report. We have $238,000 in annual energy savings. Put in a biomass system and condensing gas boilers. The facility director for Plymouth, when Nashua called him to check on our reference, he called me very excitedly and said, I just gave you the strongest recommendation he had ever given anyone, and he really invited anyone on the school board that wants to know about how we did to call Plymouth and take a tour of their new facility. We also did LED lighting and then replaced all the transformers. One of the things is, throughout your facilities, you have transformers that so the power comes in at 480 volts, and then your outlets are 120 volts, and your lighting is 277 volts. So you have a bunch of what's called step-down transformers that take your power from 480, convert it to 120 or 277. And on average, most of the school transformers we find are significantly oversized, meaning on average, there's been a study that school transformers are 8% loaded. That means that the transformers are very inefficient because the peak efficiency of a transformer is around 45%. And so by correctly sizing the transformers and putting in as energy efficient as possible, you reduce the power losses. And you might think, so a bad transformer is about 95% efficient, which sounds good when you're thinking about boilers, but what that means is if it's 95% efficient, 5% of all power that goes through it is just lost. And sometimes you walk into an electrical room and it's 120 degrees in there, and it's because it may be because you have bad transformers and you are losing some energy. So in Manchester, they had a lot of those transformers that we replaced with high efficiency, correctly sized ones, and the power drops were amazing because you pay for not only kilowatt hours, but you pay for kW demand, which is your highest demand charge of the month, and we have ratchet programs. So whenever you hit your peak point, you pay that for several months out. So unfortunately, if you have one peak month, it may hurt you. You may be paying a higher demand charge for several months. So by correctly sizing your transformers, you bring down because that's an always lost load. And we've done that at several of the Manchester schools, and one of them has its own meter. So I don't know if the JFK Ice Arena has a school, the Beach Street School right next to it. And because they have their own meter, we were able to watch the power the day before and then the day after, and the demand drop was about 20% when we took all the old transformers out of the school.
How many transformers might be in one of the high schools?
Probably 30.
Are they dedicated to different aspects, like some are dedicated to lighting, so that it's a fairly constant load all the time, rather than having AC kick in?
Yeah, and what we do is we come out and we monitor the, so we don't just go into the building and say, you have 30 transformers, we're gonna replace 30 transformers. What we do is we put meters on them, and actually during school, so we have a guy come full electric suit, measures the losses at each transformer and the load at the transformer. And sometimes, if it's necessary, we leave that metering system in place for a couple of weeks, so you can see, make sure you don't have a blip. But Manchester Memorial, the payback was, I think, 2 years to upgrade their transformers combined with a lighting retrofit.
So, winter, summer, so this will account all 4 seasons?
Yes. Yep. So that's a quick snapshot of Plymouth High School. City of Manchester, we have obtained $320,000 in annual savings. Initially, they did a $3 million bond issuance, and their goal was to just get the energy savings to pay for the bond. But like I mentioned, we significantly improved that, and then we were able to do $1 million in grants and rebates from their $3 million. So their $3 million investment yielded back $1 million in grants and rebates. They then used that funds to do more energy retrofits, and we continued to do projects for the city. In fact, we are just talking about Central High School doing LED lights there, and this has become a 6-year relationship. I believe when they did an RFQ, they got 18 respondents, some of the biggest companies in the world, Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, and we went in and just said, we will take a local approach. We'll work with you how you want to work. So we're not going to tell the City of Manchester to work toward our goals. We want to find out what your goals are, and whether it's do one building at a time, do the high school, or just look at all 22 schools. So Manchester said, we want you to look at all 22 schools, do a deep dive for 4 months, fully understand our building, and then come back to us with the best projects. And they still use that list as a way to, now that the $3 million bond is spent, they use it as a way to prioritize future spending and capital plans.
Quick question on you talked about grants and rebates. The rebates from the
Utilities.
and were the grants, like, what kind of grants?
So the grants, for example, I emailed Sean, I think, right now there's a grant on the street for renewable projects that through the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission. So what that grant is for renewable projects, and that grant in particular is a minimum of $150,000 you have to apply for, and up to $1 million. So, for example, in Portsmouth High School, we applied for that grant to do a solar field, and I believe we applied for $200,000 grant and received that. And the way that works is you get the mayor and the alderman to vote for it, and then the PUC, it's competitive, so they get submissions from, could be anybody, BAE Systems, Budweiser, any big users, and then the PUC selects the projects that have the best return on investment for the state. So the state gives you the grant, how much renewable power are you going to generate? That Plymouth High School biomass plant, we also obtained a several $100,000 grant for that. And for Manchester, we've been able to apply for various programs like that, in addition to the utility rebates.
Let me ask Mr. Donovan a question. Let's say there was an annual savings that was realized. Can those funds, right now there are certain funds that are set aside, like for maintenance, and they can carry from year to year. Most of the time you don't have that luxury. So if there were annual savings realized, would we be able to sock part of it away for future projects? Or would it have to be dealt with in the current year?
Well, I mean, if you used it like the example that Mike showed with the red, I mean, you
Mhm.
could basically say, okay, I'm gonna budget 2
Oh, I'm
million,
gonna
let's say,
spend
if I'm
that.
saving.
Yeah. you pick
Yeah,
it
so
up
you're
at the
gonna
end of the
pay
year.
for it, you pay for the upgrade with the savings.
Okay,
So that's how you use it each year.
okay. So it
we
would
can-
still
we
be
could
in the
do that.
operating budget, it would be
It still
available
would
to
be,
you?
and but it would be an annual same process, but it's one of the ways to do it.
Okay, thank you.
But if we wanted to, so in the case of Manchester where they saved more money
Yes.
each year, we could set up, in fact, we do have an energy,
We have a reserve, yes.
so we could, in theory, at the end of a year, if we had $50,000, we could put it in there until we got enough money that we could do something bigger.
Yeah,
right?
we'd have to make that request,
yeah.
but yes,
Okay.
we could maybe.
So we have either option available to us?
Well, one's a guarantee and one's, we'd have to get approved, but
Okay.
Board of Aldermen would have to agree.
So that's sort of, that was really an interview, an example of projects and an overview of performance contracting. So any more questions about that before I jump into sort of who we are in our project approach?
So, just so I understand, so you would have to decide how big, the scope of the plant. So if, there would be no sense in redoing transformers if we were gonna later convert to LED lighting.
So what I
benefit-
would say is you would want a comprehensive audit, and then you would want to force rank what you want to do. So what typically, the way this after you select a partner, the next step is to do a detailed audit where we look at everything, unless you already know exactly what you want to do and you just want us to confirm that for you. And that's the example of Plymouth. They knew they wanted to go to biomass before we were ever hired. That was the goal of that group before we ever stepped foot in the door, before they ever heard of our company. They just wanted us to find a way to get them there. So for example, I think Nashua's pretty sure that LED lights is probably makes sense in the high schools. So that would be something we would definitely spend a lot of time on. And then we would. So there's sort of two ways to approach it. One is Manchester actually got the bond first prior to the RFQ. They said, we want to do a $3 million bond. We're confident we can pay for that, and then we're just going to pick the best projects. Another way is for us to do a detailed audit, look at all the schools or just the high schools, either way, and then bring it back to you and say, hey, we found $3 million worth of projects that would save $300,000 a year. Do you want to just, let's just say, create a budget and deal with, $400,000 a year until we're done? Or do you want to finance this, like we'll create a lease or a bond and structure it so we could do all $3 million at once? Do you, in Portsmouth, they take yet a third approach. They do it a school at a time. They issue a bond, one bond per school per year. So they went with the school at a time. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think you need probably the audit, some form of an audit, before you decide which is best, because it may be it's relatively small and you can do everything at once, and then or it may be the targeted approach. One thing I would say is, from what I know of the Nashua schools, the facilities are in good condition and some are in great condition. I think you're not going to be faced with as many, at least at the high schools, like comprehensive gut projects which are going to have a terrible payback. I think you're going to find that you have more opportunities to just get better than to just total. I know that this district has been doing a great job of renovating schools, and the high schools are fairly new, although it's funny that I think of them as new, but they're all starting to get 15 years, right? I think.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't pay him to see all that.
May I ask a question to Mr. Smith? So the high schools are the best place, obviously, to start.
Yeah, we had some very preliminary figures from one of the other companies here that suggested we could easily save $50,000 a year. And even though they're 15 years old, there's still T8 lights And that goes on from there, with transformers and other parts.
So I-
Just keep in mind too, I guess my question was gonna be your experience with solar, you talked about a little bit. That's another thing that this committee's been somewhat inundated with information on recently is installing solar.
And solar, the paybacks on solar are getting better. I will say that there are some international politics which might change that, meaning there's talk of the US putting a tariff on Chinese solar panels, which would potentially have a 30% increase in the cost. So right now, before that tariff exists, the paybacks are pretty good, but if the costs go up 30%, that will have an impact, and everyone in the market is talking about that. However, we sometimes include solar as part of this project. The general consensus of solar is it's not as good a payback as things like VFD drives and LED lights. So if you had a $10,000 to spend and you said, where's your best investment? I would probably say VFD drives and lights first, and then get your consumption down, and then do solar, or do it comprehensive, meaning let's figure out how much we can save, and then let's not build a solar plant that is going to have more capacity than we need. In general, it's worth more to save money at your building than to sell power back to the meter. So if you did a solar project, you really want to maximize reducing your own consumption with that solar, because selling it back to the grid, it's generally worth less than it is to you in your own building. So we did a comprehensive solar project for Portsmouth High School, and then at every Portsmouth school we've done solar projects, and we sometimes factor it in. It's what we do is we create we call it the Chinese menu of everything that you could do at the school, and then we don't try and sway you one way or the other. We say, here's your best paybacks, here's your renewable projects. One thing that, for example, of Plymouth, the biomass project was not their quickest return on investment. Meaning, if they were just going to put in a propane boiler and high efficiency, they don't have natural gas yet in Plymouth, but a high efficiency propane boiler was going to have a quicker, simple payback. Meaning the payback was going to be 15 years, whereas the biomass boiler was 19. However, they looked at the whole life cycle. So the biomass savings over the 30-year life of the boiler saved more. And so that's one of the things with solar. If you look at the simple payback, meaning how much you spend versus how much you save, it's not a home run to do. But if you look at, okay, this panel is going to last 25 years, the school's going to be here 25 years, it'll be paid off in 12 or 15, and then years 15 through 25 are just pure profit. So it generally, the way it's structured for municipalities is it pays for itself. If you lease it outright, it pays for itself for the first 15 years or so, and then the years out are in the green. The other way to do it is what's called a power purchase agreement. That's where a company like ours would own the system, and then you would pay nothing out of pocket. Then we would sell you the power for a fraction of a cent less than you're paying now. That would put more money in our pockets because we're owning and then maintaining and selling it to you. But if you look at the long term, you generally save more money over the life cycle the other way. The question is, what's more beneficial to the city? Is it more beneficial for you to own your own systems, or is it more beneficial? And that comes down to how much, whether or not you want to finance them, what your bonding capacity, what other projects. So there's a whole host of other things. And so sometimes it's easier for the school districts to just say, somebody else own them, we'll sign a power contract with you guys for 15 years, and then we'll own them so there's a few different ways to do it.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes. We have the other two
Okay.
groups going. And I did give you a little more time because you were giving us the background. on
Yes.
it, too.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about EEI. I'll say quickly, we are right now doing more performance contracting with school districts in New Hampshire than any other company with, like I said, Plymouth, Keene, Portsmouth, Manchester, and Belmont, several others. We're a completely local team, and we partner with, we have agreements with large companies because we do so much here in New Hampshire. So we have a special pricing agreement with Phillips, who's a big lighting vendor, and they've actually specifically asked to partner with us because of the success of the projects in the other districts. And Phillips is, what's great about them is, in general, and they have the best products for LED in almost every school condition. You can take out a light here that is burning at about 90 watts, replace it with something that's 30 watts and dimmable and looks modern, and the price of that fixture is less than $90. And the payback, depending on how many hours it operates, is generally between 5 and 6 years. And if you have a chance to look at some of the Manchester or Plymouth schools, they rave about that style of lighting. And Phillips they also offer some innovative technology, which is motion sensors and daylight sensing. So if you're in a library or by the windows, the lights will automatically dim, and then they can communicate. You can actually program the different lights dim differently, so there's some great opportunities with that. Project financing, we pretty much hit this. I will say that there are, for some of these projects, zero interest financing. So there's the utilities here in New Hampshire have a program called Smart Start that allows school districts and municipalities to fund some projects on bill at 0% interest. So we're doing a project, I think, with Manchester Memorial High School this summer that will be 0% interest, and your electric bill stays the same for 5 years. Then when it's paid off, your electric bill goes down and you own the lights.
We've used that quite a bit.
Yep. I think I talked a lot about area schools that we've done. Lawrence, Massachusetts schools is something that is another project where we've done a very large district and audited almost all of their schools. One of the things that we're often asked and are very proud to do is tying in education of students with these type of projects. So at Portsmouth High School, there's a solar field and there's a dashboard that tells entrance to the building how much you're saving per year and how much renewable is generating. And then the Plymouth project, we use that as a showcase. So people from all over the world, believe it or not, have come to that Plymouth school. We actually had an Indian reservation. People from Ontario flew in because they wanted to use that technology, and this was so at the forefront. And I could go into that for a lot, but I know we're short on time. And then we also are arranging tours of the Phillips Design Labs, which are in Andover and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what that does is allows students who are interested in engineering and electrical to see the products in their classrooms, how they were designed, and what's coming up in the future of that industry. The lighting industry, which used to be a pretty bland industry, has actually gotten pretty exciting in that there's a lot of great technology coming out in the future.
Can you comment on the CTI Controls training program?
Yeah, so CTI Controls, they first of all, they train the maintenance and staff here in Nashua, so many of the employees have received training, and they're active in the community training facility directors on the HVAC controls. So once we get in and put in an energy efficiency system, keeping it efficient sort of falls on the building operators. So not only do we train the building operators, but CTI is active in training people that want to get into the industry and bringing them up to speed with the control system.
So if we had an HVAC program, that might be a source of internships and things like that.
Absolutely. We're actually doing the Manchester Community College HVAC Advanced Tech Lab, where we provided all IP-based controls and open programming software, so that
So you could help us build out a lab too if we wanted
yes,
some kind of.
and I think we did a little version of that in the South.
Okay.
When they built that, there was an HVAC lab, and I think instructor was Tom Walsh, I think. I think we gave him some training.
Students.
Well,
And we need
one
contractors.
thing at a time, but thank you. That's important to me, I think.
All right, so I think you covered this at the beginning, the
Yep.
CTI.
Yep.
You're familiar with that.
And then technology, we've hit most of this technology. I think that is a good summary of who we are and what we've done. I would say, you know, just, we tend to be the David in a sea of Goliaths. And so I always remind people that David actually did win against Goliath, but it wasn't an easy one. And we would really love to work with you. We think we have a great team. And George would love to roll out of bed and be at work at.
I'd like the bike to work. There was a gentleman at the state of New Hampshire I'm envious of. He's the engineer up there. He bikes to all the state buildings. It's like, I could actually envision that.
Now with people like Sean driving around, you gotta be careful.
Ouch.
Oh.
And I know, I could
I live
honestly,
in Temple, though, so.
Okay.
I could, if you have any time, one of the cool things, and I just want to hit this because we're really proud of this. This is the tool that if the project goes ahead and we do the project, this shows the annual energy savings and how it's maintained. And so, for example, in Plymouth, we projected, if you see on page 3, 137,000. And because we're continuously commissioning and getting better, we're actually up to 240,000 in energy savings. And this is a report that we give to the facility directors in a meeting each quarter. And what it says, if you look through it, on page 14, that's sort of an easy example. This is all your spaces that were ever over 80 degrees and under 60 degrees. What that becomes, not only is it's an energy opportunity, it means you're overheating or overcooling a space. What it also is a preventative maintenance tool, because every room, we trend every room, and if there's a room that's always over 80 or constantly 55 degrees, that probably means there's a controls or mechanical failure. So we're starting to introduce not only this as an energy tool, but as a preventative maintenance tool that we can go to you guys and say, look at room Science Lab 208. It drifted between 63 and 82 degrees in the month of September. That tells you there's probably a control valve problem there or something. So that's been very popular tool for the districts, and that's a part of the services we provide.
Continuous
Thank you
commissioning is a
very
huge buzzword, and this is an excellent example of everything you get from it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, could you send the presentation to Sean?
I actually put it on your computer too.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So send it to
Don't worry
Dan.
about sending it to him.
Yeah. And you wanted this computer back, right?
Yes. I do.
Do you also get into like water faucets and shower heads and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
High efficiency devices.
Well, one quick thing to worry about on water, a lot of times the underground is designed for high water flow. And so if you put in a ton of low water flow, you can sometimes run into backup, so
Yeah.
just have to be a little careful.
Well,
Good and run.
Well,
So you have Cape empty sometime.
It's scary to see a report like this, classroom temperatures in some of the old buildings.
yeah,
Amongst
that's the last
others.
thing we need there.
Well, I'm thinking, isn't there one or two others? I mean, Mount Pleasant we've addressed.
Elm
Some-
Street.
Are
we done with the screen?
I don't know, we've got two more
I don't know.
presentations.
That would be scary.
I don't know whether they'll have
Right.
presentations.
Two more presentations?
Two more.
This is all we're doing tonight, is presentations.
Sounds good. Good evening.
What's that?
No discussion.
Where we're at.
Yeah, first slide up here, here's your,
The connection? Yes. Super.
so any one of these seats.
All right, good, thank you. Hi, how you doing?
Hi, good
Hi.
evening.
Good evening. Jim Lucy with Honeywell. We can probably do our introductions. I know we got
Yeah,
a
why don't we,
tight timeline,
there's a
so.
sheet, so we'll know later if we met you before.
Yes.
You gotta watch out for the rat's nest of wires and cables.
Yeah, there's one more chair up here if that's too tight.
You wanna sit
there.
down here? Jim's an all right guy, sit next to him.
Yeah, well, I already realized I wasn't following the column, so I had to stretch out, so.
Can't stay within the lines.
No.
When you were a little kid, did you like never feel, your crayons were always outside the?
I was okay with that. I was actually reminding one of my kids of that the other day, so.
So two things, probably about 30 minutes, that's
Okay.
probably where we'll run for this.
Okay.
You may have been helped a little bit by just the first presentation, just because he gave us some background, so if I feel like you're going over material we already know,
Yep.
we can skip some of that, because you probably have the same upfront stuff, probably.
Yeah, I mean,
So they
we,
kind of understand performance contracting and
Gotcha.
energy performance contracting specifically.
yeah, I mean, we could talk for a while, and I know that's not the intent. I mean, our goal here is to really explain to you why us.
Right.
And what are the differentiators in kind of a resume or qualifications-based submittal. And that's what we're focused on, and so we could talk for a long time, so I just push us around. When you have questions, ask. I mean, we're here to try to be educational for
Okay.
you.
So you want to do introduction?
Yeah, we'll just do introductions, so I'll go around here. My name's Jim Lucy, I'm with Honeywell. I've been this is just starting my 25th year with Honeywell, 24 of those years. This is the type of work that I've done. Work primarily in Maine and New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts. I've been involved in over 100 of these projects from start to finish. I've seen projects that we've sold with a 20-year term come to expiration. So primary focus has been developing these projects and supporting customers down the road. So I'm going to flip it to Bob here next.
My name is Bob Marcotte, and I am a lead energy engineer at Honeywell. We call ourselves solution development engineers. I've been with Honeywell for 13 years. Prior to that, I was 16 years at an AE firm, which I understand you have some experience with, Harriman Associates in Auburn. I was a lead mechanical engineer there. If I was still there, I'd be the mechanical department head right now. All of my 13 years with Honeywell have been this team right here. Pretty much haven't worked with anybody else, so a lot of experience with this team together.
I'm Rudy Cartier. I'm the measurement and verification specialist. What that basically is that I'm the one who's responsible for the guarantee, that it's met every year, basically from the start of the project and acceptance in your portion of the program, and then for the next whatever years that the guarantees are in there for. My background's in energy and in environmental engineering. I worked for Phillips Extra Academy. I worked for a major gas distribution company. Worked on some cogeneration plants for wastewater treatment plants, so I've got a good varied background with schools as well as industry areas.
Okay, I guess Gary King.
Gary King, I'm project manager for Honeywell. I've been working with Honeywell for 38 years. Did a variety of different jobs within Honeywell, but say for the last 20 years I've been doing performance contracting for the most part, working, as Bob said, with his team.
So one of the points that we want to stress today is team. It's very hard. We appreciate looking at a resume, particularly something that an industry that you're not focusing on every day and saying, why us? And everyone's going to come in and I think conceptually talk about things that sound very similar. To me, the power of the team is immense here. And so one of the things that the stress here is that we have worked together collectively as a team since Rudy started about 9 years ago. Worked with Bob for 13, and Gary and I worked together collectively through my whole career. And this is the team that's in front of you tonight. So just like a sports analogy, the more people play together, the better they become. You try to learn from your mistakes, and the practice of performance contracting and some of the lessons learned is what we want to share with you tonight and some of the differentiators. And that, to me, is a hard thing to do because others can say the same thing. We'll do our best to try to substantiate that. So what I wanted to do is do really three things. We got a bunch of why Honeywell things. We want to talk a little bit about, I actually wanted to show you a video for 3 minutes. We've worked with Interlake School District is one of many examples of New Hampshire School Districts Council. We've done multiple phase projects. Reason I show them is because they were highlighted last year by 2 independent two independent entities. National School Boards Association highlighted them in their Clean, Green, Safe Schools program, and NEAP, which is the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, gave them an Energy Efficiency Award, a Business Leader of the Year award. I'm actually going up tomorrow to speak with, they have at New Hampshire Energy Summit for High Performance Schools is located at Interlakes High School, and I'll be co-presenting with them in the afternoon to talk about the result of our project. So this, to me, is an example of the type of relationship, the type of capabilities that we have. And I don't want to focus too much on it, but I think the quick illustration of it is helpful to kind of illustrate some points that we try to emphasize there.
I'll be in the audience listening to you.
Oh, you're coming?
Are you
Okay,
going up?
super. Yeah. So I successfully, I think, got the
Off
internet
internet.
connection in the car. Oh,
Did you get on our network?
I got on my, I'm on my, my phone.
You're on, okay.
On my hotspot. There we
Might-
go.
Might be easier.
I guess 4 minutes.
Hopefully it doesn't buffer too much.
We have a plan B if it does.
It's like Plan B, Jimmy.
Yeah, plan B. All right, we're gonna skip the video. Yeah. All right.
I had to give a live demo this morning in DC.
Did you?
And I had that same, not,
The same.
it had worked, but you know, you always have that fear that this is what happened.
Well, I should have saved it from my hard drive, but that's okay. Anyways, maybe we can come back to that. I don't know if you have a network that might give a better signal, but, anyways, let me go back to, I want to go back to 2 pages here. I don't want to spend much time on this because I'm accused of doing just that. 15 seconds on Honeywell. We're a big company. We're a Fortune 100 company. We're about 40 billion in sales, 100 different countries, 127,000 employees. To me, the takeaway there is we've been around since 1885. We're financially stable. We're strong. We're not going anywhere. Honeywell in New Hampshire, quick facts, is we're about 70 employees strong. When you add in the retirees that live here in the state, we're over 600. We're a big contributor to the economy. We annually about 60 million in purchases. You can see some of the top suppliers to the right. Well, the closest one would be right in Hudson. And as far as the subject we're talking about tonight, we've done 52 performance contracts in the state since we started tracking these in the early 90s. So we talk about this video. I encourage you, there is a link in the an executive summary of our response to look at it. You can just Google Honeywell, Interlake School District, or NSBA. To me, the point of this is the evolution of work. Really starts just like you do. I know you're doing a lot of major construction work, from comprehensive planning and consulting engineer work to get to a point where you've got funding and then design and implementation. No different in these kind of projects. It starts with understanding your goals, your objectives. From there, we try to do comprehensive planning. That's one of the big attributes that we'll talk about in the rationale around it. And then as a result of that partnership, as long as we deliver, and they see value into it, we maintain partnerships over time. In Interlakes, we've done 2 phases. Derry, we've done 2 phases. Merrimack, we've done 4 phases. Pembroke, we've done 3 phases, and I can go on and on. That's the result of a good team, somebody that's demonstrating value to a client. The reason this really highlighted the culmination of a 10-year partnership. 2005, we did the first level of planning and implementation. We came back in 2014 and did the second wave. The first phase of that work was really organically demand-side energy efficiency improvements, and they had a lot of old, outdated infrastructure. They had ventilation deficiencies, comfort issues, some of the things I think you're experiencing, some of the buildings you've yet to renovate. Second phase of it was really enabled by 2 things. It was enabled by additional equipment that was old at the end of its life. We had a generational improvement with LED lighting and things, and there was also an appetite and improvement in technology and renewables. We implemented solar. Interlakes, in my opinion, is arguably the most sustainably or renewably fueled, both from electricity and a heating standpoint, school district in New Hampshire. So you can see some of the stats there associated with that. One of the cool things that Interlakes has done that is a challenge, because it involves board endorsement and commitments, and boards change a lot, and as well as administrators, is they've taken it to the academic level. So they've done grassroots things where they've built a greenhouse. They have sustainability interaction in their curriculum. The solar that we installed about 350 kW out of their high school, which powers about 80% of that load, is integrated into the classroom. So you'll see, if you watch this video, you'll see a lot of teacher interaction, a lot of board members that are talking about the impact. That's one of the reasons they were highlighted by NSBA, and actually the electric co-op up there, which is the main utility for them, they sponsored them to NEAT as far as the business leader of the board.
Maybe you can email Sean that link, Jim.
I will,
So they don't have to
yeah.
worry about writing it down.
So these are some of the key attributes that we'll try to go through fast. I'm not going to talk about every one. We want to reinforce them with some slides thereafter. So, you know, a lot of things that's similar themes. So experience, team, big attributes, being flexible, being cooperative. This is not all about us, it's about you. You're looking at this, I'm confident, knowing Sean a little bit. Sean's at the upper end of his profession about capabilities. People look to partner with us for three things: time, resources, and money. It's not the lack of ideas that he has, it's the resources to get it done, it's the access to capital, and it's the money piece of it. And that's really what we bridge the gap. The money
Sean
piece.
write that for you?
Yeah.
I didn't pay him for this.
No interaction or discussion there. So we come in and we help manage risk by identifying opportunities to save and then contractually guaranteeing those opportunities. We provide the resources and the know-how, but really this is about how we help you move the ball up the field. And I think, you know, the other thing I'll highlight in here is really a process that we've worked over time. We've worked a lot as a team. Every reference you see in our response, we have all been involved with. So we try to learn, and each example, we'll try to highlight some of those in the Q&A tonight. This is a competitive space. You had, I think, 8 responses to this. We get that. We are very confident in our ability to deliver the most cost-effective, best value results in any given project. So we're going to talk about the practice, what we'll call the practice of performance contracting. And again, the more of these you do, the better you become. And I think those are strong attributes that really, as you try to unpeel this, are differentiators. So comprehensive planning is a big deal. You again guide the ship around where you want to go. But when we look at today's world of energy, there's all kinds of different planning elements. So I'll talk a minute about what we mean by comprehensive planning. Importance of accurate, detailed baseline. This is where the rubber hits the road. If you're going to make financial decisions off a baseline, a group of assumptions, you want to make sure that they're accurate. You want to make sure your expectations as a board and as administration are on the same plane as us as the vendor. So criticality of doing that. The reality of it is you'll never repeat a fiscal year again of energy usage. There's 3 reasons why: usage, rates, and weather. And so the idea of developing an accurate baseline is critically important. Collaborative process. Things like doing 100% design before we start are things we've learned over time. That's one of the things I think that gives design build a bad rap, is you're doing things in parallel. Those are just good examples of what we've learned over time. Local team experience and working in public schools. 90% of the business we do, plus, is probably in the public sector. Most of it is in public schools. Majority of what we do in construction, projects Gary and other project managers in New Hampshire are doing, is in the school environment. So we understand how schools operate, we understand work rules, we understand solutions that work, that don't work. And that leads to me the next one. Don't make assumptions, trust but verify. So Bob can give examples of how we try to do that, of opening up equipment, looking at things. Don't make assumptions around things work. Those are some of the things that we've learned the hard way by cutting checks because we've made the wrong assumptions or missing expectations.
One example of that I'll give, don't make assumptions, is we think we're very, very thorough in how we survey buildings and identify potential opportunities. And one of the things that we do to help ourselves to identify where issues are is we talk to the facilities people. We'll talk to Sean, we'll talk to Gary, we'll talk to the custodians who are in the building, because they're in the building way more than we are. So we get feedback from them, and lots of times they'll tell us things that they believe to be true about the building and the systems in the building. Like this air handling unit shuts off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or this air handling unit is bringing in outside air, or various things that we trust what they tell us, but the trust but verify adage. We will go and we will dig in, we'll open up equipment, we will check to confirm that even though we were told that a unit is bringing in fresh ventilation air, we physically put our eyes on it. We may even go back to, we do go back to the louver itself, because sometimes you can be looking at a piece of equipment that the equipment itself is trying to bring fresh air in, but you go over to the louver and you find out that the louver has been boarded off back in the 70s, when people didn't care about not bringing ventilation air in. Things like that Jim was saying, don't make assumptions. That's just some of the examples that we do to provide a very accurate baseline.
Right.
So you have, to try to move this along, as I know time's limited, I know the focus of this initiative is to look at the two high schools. Both of those, I think, were renovated in '04. So this, to me, is a good example that you should have good as-built drawings. We're not gonna take those as gospel. We're gonna go through and we're gonna validate those in the space. We're gonna look at whether, was it commissioned right, is the stuff operating right? And that goes, so Bob went through South High School previously. He spent about a day there, and he typically would spend way more than a day. He identified about 24 different opportunities for ways to save energy or make improvements from an efficiency standpoint just in that one day. That was primarily looking at demand side improvements, not supply side initiatives. And I'll give a handout at the end here. There's detail around each one of those 24 that he evaluated. So to me, that goes back to team. I mean, that's the irony of a performance contract. If we find more areas to save, our cost could be higher, our value is greater. So that's to me, the hard margin that you're in is how do you evaluate who's the best value? And one of the things in this industry is who's going to be around for the long term, because there's some tremendous transitions in this space, and I think there'll continue to be from financial solvency and stability. So comprehensive approach. From my knowledge of you guys have really done very well in really the green, traditional demand side, been aggressive there. The blue of being aggressive on commodity, third-party commodity agreements. Really the capital renewal, perfect job there around keeping renewal and upgrades of major renovations of buildings. And then you guys were a pioneer in the yellow. I mean, you had a contract with energy educators 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago on the behavioral side. So to me, when we do a comprehensive plan, you've got to look at the sum of all these parts. You may not want to implement them, but you, in this day and age, you cannot look at demand side in a linear way anymore. Since we've become restructured or deregulated, you've got to look at how supply interacts. You've got renewables and other opportunities that are entering the space. It's a myriad of different things that are coming to people's doorstep. It's amazing since we hit oil peaked in 08, 09 range, the front of mind awareness politically around doing things that are green and the pain point people felt. That really, with the stimulus, started a lot of the renewable stuff being more viable and cost effective. So capital renewal is a big piece. You can't look at the infrastructure without looking at its useful life. Does it meet current codes? Where does it stand in the useful life? And then the behavioral piece, to me, is the most challenging, but the cheapest from a first cost standpoint and the most rewarding if you can sustain the opportunity around educational curriculum integration, energy awareness, and promotion. So when we do comprehensive planning, unless directed differently, we're going to do a comprehensive evaluation of the whole part, so you can evaluate which makes the most sense to implement over time. Honeywell approach, things that we feel are unique to us. It may sound similar to others, but first and foremost is you ask for the first step here if you select somebody is to do an audit. It's very traditional. That's the planning phase. We don't look to charge for the audit. It's not like we're going to try to be inexpensive in that effort. We're confident. I have never had a project in my 25 years where they haven't been satisfied with the value that we bring to the table, where they want to move forward with it. To me, this is an area in the industry that's got commoditized, where people can relate to money, and when you come in and say it's going to be 6 cents or 12 cents, I don't know how many projects where people focus on that and they take their eye off the ball around the results. So we're not worried about an audit fee in this. That was part of our submission. We're big into transparency, and it's a culture of an organization. So from a pricing standpoint, a markup standpoint, multiple bids that we get in defined scope of work, all of that is openly disclosed. From a design review standpoint, very traditional to the normal process for 30, 60, 90, and final design reviews with Sean and team. Even though Honeywell makes stuff, we're in our business, we represent of the $40 billion company about 2 to 3 billion business unit called Honeywell Building Solutions. Our group, Honeywell Energy Services, is vendor and solution neutral. So we make, the biggest thing that we would make would be controls. We probably own the biggest non-proprietary open system called Tritium that's in the marketplace, but we're really technology agnostic. I know you have Siemens, you have an Avensis product in your schools. We'll work with that. So think of it, you're hiring engineering and a construction entity, not somebody who makes stuff. Yes, sir.
So AIA, is that architect?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So our workbook is really just around AIA standards, which I'm guessing to some degree you follow with some of the construction work that you do.
Yeah.
So we try to align towards a third-party standard in as many things as we can do to have credibility in doing so. So contractor selection, we typically have a multiple bid process. We have a company policy. We try to get 3 bids for each scope of work. We're also open in this process to use as many local vendors that are pre-approved or required by the school district. I mean, as much local work we can do, we feel the better that is and all around. A good example is an electrician in a school environment. If you're relying upon somebody who knows your buildings and they change lamps and ballasts and other things, using them could be beneficial down the road from an O&M standpoint. First party guarantees is a big deal. I'll talk about guarantees in a little bit. We're a strong, very financially stable company. We guarantee everything first party. We don't go through an insurance company. The last thing you want to be doing is in a situation where your expectation around what was delivered doesn't happen. And so guarantees only as good as a bunch of variables. And it's important as you develop these projects, you have a credible, experienced entity that knows how to develop them, deliver results, and if you don't deliver the results, actually pay a check for the difference.
Just on your first item there, all the other respondents to this process are between 4 and 7 cents per square foot for audit cost.
Want to do the math for me, because I don't know what the high schools are.
About 430 each. According to 430,000 square feet each, so 860. Sorry, I
Still
didn't
trying
mean
to
to
do the
jump
math,
out.
trying to figure
Yeah.
out the math.
50 grand or
Yeah.
so?
50 grand, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds like they will.
So this is just, again, an illustration of the process. Again, this is design build, performance-based contracting, but we really try to do the similar processes and steps that are involved in any kind of construction effort. So again, investment grade audit is a word in the industry for planning. That's where we're going to define the baseline. We're going to collaboratively do that. We're going to agree upon the baseline period we're going to use, the weather periods we're going to use, the rates that we're going to use, things that we can't control. We're going to do site surveys and preliminary engineering. We're going to have opportunities for collaboration and meeting with you to get direction around what you like and what you don't like. And then we're going to identify and agree upon a scope of work based upon your criteria, return on investment and other attributes. And then when we agree upon that, we're going to go into the design and bid process that typically is done once we get into an agreement. We will do these in arrears, and then construction, commissioning, and ongoing M&V, and then customized support services. One of the keys in developing these projects is how do we maintain the persistence of savings over time? No different than when you buy a car and you rotate the tires and change the oil. More complicated in these systems. You can never assume when you do a renovation system, things are going to run on autopilot. So having a persistence of saving, that's where Rudy comes in, M&V, to make sure kind of on an ongoing commissioning basis, we're going back to design, basis of design conditions and ensuring that things work, and got a process in place to make sure you're getting the return.
Jim, this is a good slide for me to make a good point here. This team, I'm primarily the top line. Rudy right here is primarily the green line at the bottom. He's measurement and verification. Gary is primarily the green line at the bottom. He's the project manager for construction. Jim's involved throughout the whole thing. And there was a point in time years ago where we kind of stayed separate. I stayed in the blue and went through into design because I have design background, so I lead the design team. And then we handed it over to Gary, and Gary did the construction, and then he handed it over to Rudy. And we learned many years ago that's not a seamless transition when these two guys are out of the loop until we get to the green. So now, and for several years now, we've been running our projects where these two guys start getting involved at the very top. I mean, they're not spending time surveying with me and what have you, but they're involved with meetings, internal conference calls. They know what's going on with the project. They know what we're developing, and I go through more into the green too. As it's being constructed, I am involved with their conversations on a daily basis, problems that may be coming up during construction. What was your intent? What do we have to do to make sure that we satisfy the intent and not compromise the quality of the project for the customer? So this team is very much integrated throughout the whole thing, where at one point in our history many years ago, it was more separated. And that's a lesson, probably one of the biggest lessons learned that this team has had.
Yeah, very much. I mean, we would hike and flip the ball to Gary once the thing was sold, and that's changed big time. And there's been the results and the quality improvements have changed as a result. So I'm just trying to move along here. I've talked a little bit about financial stability, longevity, and measurement verification capabilities, or M&V. To me, that's a differentiator. I mean, We've been around since 1885. We've got about 7.8 billion cash on the hand, and we do have first party liabilities that we carry on our books. And so you ask for in the bid IPMVP standards. So that stands for International Protocols for Measurement and Verification. International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, excuse me. And they break it down into 4 ways, A, B, C, D, that you measure and verify results. They're standards that people in our industry have to follow. They basically supersede FEMP, Federal Energy Management Program guidelines. And a lot of people focus around measuring and verifying things and what's the option A and B around. That's calculation-based things that are largely verified post-construction after you do like a pre-measurement for watts for lights and a post-measurement. As long as it comes out right, guarantees done and satisfied at the end of contract execution. It's really not a guarantee. It's a spreadsheet calculation with validated points. I think that makes sense from a cost standpoint in non-weather dependent loads, like lighting, for example, but in weather dependent loads, heating-based things, option C is your utility bill. So we establish that baseline, we collect your utility bill post-construction, and we basically reconcile off things at utility bill. So we want to talk about, to me, simple way to look at it is A and B is less risk to companies like us. C is more risk to companies like us. There's a balance point around how much you pay to manage risk, but option C is something we do as the norm. Pretty much every project we've ever done in New Hampshire is that way. I would say most vendors do options A and B, which really is not a guarantee in a lot of ways. So that to me is a big difference. This gives you a little more illustration around the metrics of our historical M&V. And yes, we do actually pay out. So the top one here is in North America. We started tracking stuff we've done about 8.5 billion's worth of guaranteed contractual obligations. That's the big number on top. We've paid out just over 0.5% of that over time, of just under $50 million. And I highlighted the 3 states that our team has experience in. And you can see just in New Hampshire, we've got about 71 million in contractual guarantee liabilities. We paid out about 170, and we have some active payouts as we speak. Not big, but things that we've learned over time. Data logging is a big one. Don't just ask the custodian what the runtime is. Validate it with a data logger. Validate it with discussions. And we've had some expensive mistakes with that, and we've had some expectation issues with that as well. So again, many, many lessons learned. In New Hampshire, the other bullet point here to describe is that on average, our guarantees are achieving 27% more than we state in our contracts. And that's a running thing. So we have a lot of metrics. Rudy's group is actually decoupled and not part of our team because of the independence and the way the company wants to separate the two. He's really coming in and independently verifying, are we doing what we said we were going to do contractually against the plan that we developed collectively. We're really good, in my opinion, at finding free money or third-party money. I will say, in doing this for a long time, this is more complicated than ever. I can think of projects that I did in the '94 timeframe. We did a first project with the Rochester School District. At the time, PSNH, now Eversource. It was like a secret fund of incentives that you had. You might remember this, Sean. They would almost play their favorites who they were going to give money to. Now we've shifted to a more front-of-mind awareness. A portion of anyone who lives in New Hampshire's bill and other states, you're paying for incentives. And there's a variety of those out there. From a legislation, from a regulatory, and just a day-to-day incentive change, they change like the wind. So we have people at full-time, this is what they focus on. I can think of just every legislative session in New Hampshire, there's changes going on with the renewable portfolio standard in different ways for end users to take advantage. As a result of that, it becomes super complicated, in my opinion, around knowing which solution you go with. And so to me, that's one of the things that we've become really good at being in this industry. We are a consultant that evaluates supply, demand, and all different solutions. We have lots of experience around what works, because when we deliver something, we actually have to put our money where our mouth is of delivering it. And as part of that experience, we've got to kind of sift through what makes the most sense, and that's part of our role of sifting through which solutions make the most sense, so you as the client can choose which route meets your criteria from an ROI standpoint. So we got lots of experience here, customizing things, evaluating things. On the financing side, if that's an option, I know you guys as a city form, You typically will go the bonding route, but lease purchases is a very popular way to go as well. Interest rates are very competitive. We help with procuring that, bidding it on your behalf, finding funding sources, evaluating alternative funding sources, whether that's PPA or non-PPA. To me, that's all part of what we do on your behalf to evaluate what's the right solution for your individual considerations. And so we have significant, the Interlakes one of the things that illustrates is there's alternative energy credits through thermal RECs that we took advantage of. There's solar RECs that we took advantage of. There's building aid when that was available back in '05 that we took advantage of. There's utility rebates.
Building aid, what's that?
Maybe coming back someday, but yeah. But that was, so anyways, lots of different sources that we're very good at finding.
So on the rebates, can you go back to the slide where you had broken out each state and how much?
Yeah.
So of the, no, I guess this isn't what I was thinking. So what kind of, I don't know how to give this number, so I'll let you decide. So in terms of rebates, what's typical, like on a project, or what's average? I mean, if I took that $70 million,
It's is it Robert?
Yeah.
It's so dependent upon the state.
yeah.
It's dependent upon the moment in time you're in. These policy changes change very rapidly. I can tell you we're doing a project that we're just finishing up. Gary's managing in Derry School District. It's the second phase, about $10 million worth of work like this. We estimated them $150,000 incentive from Eversource, which we knew was a little conservative. I think we're close to $250,000. We're also taking advantage of rebates through Liberty Utilities as well. But then when you get into the kind of renewable space, there's a whole different level of incentives that can be incorporated through the federal side of investment tax credits that incorporate back to you as the owner, and one way to receive it, or you can go through the PUC C&I program to get grants. There's REC programs on the electric side, there's REC programs on the thermal side. So it's very specific to the moment in time and the type of project and the portfolio of that project that you're looking at. So it's really hard to say X percentage.
Do you remember what the total incentive was for Interlakes, Jim? I can't remember what that number was.
I don't off the top of my head, but it's my assumption is in the high schools, you've got a good opportunity for LED lighting, demand side things on the electric side. Those are really good incentive opportunities at this day and age. You also have probably some thermal opportunities through gas savings, and we took advantage of that very heavily in Derry. And then if you want to look at some renewable type scenarios, that gets into a whole different criteria of evaluating, and ultimately ways that you want to fund or finance a program. Ownership directly, PPA, which is just nothing more than creative financing of how you procure solar, and then there's some other programs that are available, and just the constant evolution of that. We're working, for example, which is pretty common for us with the city of Boston right now, we're evaluating one of the measures is solar, which is the best route for them to go with the myriad of solutions that they have available to them. So I got two more slides and I'm done. So to me, this is individual stuff based upon each community. One of the things I want to stress is that we have, you guys, your buildings are all about kids. Your buildings are there to maximize the return on the investment of the money you put in, to get the best output for test scores and learning experiences. Where owners are receptive, we have lots of programs to do that. We have a huge STEM initiative as an organization. We have a group called Honeywell Hometown Solutions that us as employees all to some degree invest in. And so give you some local examples of that. So some STEM things that we did. We have something called Honeywell Educators at Space Academy. Last year we had 2 teachers from Merrimack that attended. This is from middle school science and technology or science or math teachers. You can see the upper left-hand article, Marge Chaffrey, the superintendent there, she sent me 2 articles that have been in the local paper. That's highlighting one. So what happens, it's an all expense-paid trip to the U.S. Rocket Center down in Huntsville, Alabama, and they immerse themselves into STEM-type programs that they can take back into the classroom. FMA Live is a program that we have that's based upon Newton's laws of motion. It's a interactive hip-hop thing. We go around to middle school age as well. We have come to New Hampshire numerous times. We last came in 2016 with the Portsmouth Middle School, Allenstown Middle School, Merrimack Valley. So just ways that we give back there. We have a
Now,
program.
which one of you does the hip hop?
Not me. I got, yeah, my wife would laugh at the idea of me dancing.
Do you do a rock and roll version?
Yeah.
Rudy, I think, is.
Yeah, that's right. He's in a band, yeah.
I'm going with Rudy on the rock.
So we have something called Green Boot Camp. We have internship programs for juniors and seniors through a manpower service if they want to be involved in the audit. We'll incorporate them into the process. So lots of things that we do to give back. We also are big in trying to give back to the community through Habitat Humanity and other things. So that's a part of what we do and some local examples. And then this is just the last slide, which really emphasizes on the right things that we feel are important of why us. And I couldn't be any more confident of being in this business for a while, having a real good idea of who we interact and compete with on a regular basis, there's a reason we've done more performance contracts in New Hampshire and New England than any other company, and there's a reason that we get repeat business. And so in our response to the left, I did a couple of call-out boxes. We have some letters of recommendation, and those are some excerpts from those that are a component of our response. Yes, sir.
So, if you go back to the notion of a comprehensive energy audit, and you
Yep.
folks, there's no fee for that, if I heard you correctly. So, let's just take one of the high schools, not both. So is it a year-round kind of an audit? I mean,
No, I would be doing the audit, so I'll just briefly
Yep.
explain what I would do. So I would gather any blueprints that you have of the building. I would sit down and have interviews with Sean, Gary, and the facility staff. I would do a walkthrough of the building myself. I focus on the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. That's my background. We have teams of specialists that we would send to your building for specialty items. I have a specialist for lighting. We'd send him to walk through the building, a specialist for building envelope, insulation, that sort of thing, a specialist for water conservation, several specialists that we would send to. That whole team, I would kind of lead that team. And in my survey on the HVAC side, I would install, as Jim said, temperature loggers in your building to see how you're setting your building down at night for temperature, and on weekends, or is it staying at 72 degrees all day long on weekends also?
And to add is the interface that Sean has in his office and the controls, is it actually working? Because a lot of times
Yes.
you assume what's on the computer is accurate, might
True.
not be the case in the space.
True. And I would put motor loggers in all of the major equipment, the air handling units, large exhaust fans, that sort of thing, to find out is equipment being shut off nights and weekends. I would also go in with a carbon dioxide meter to walk into representative, this is the only time that we disturb an occupied space, because it has to be in an occupied space. And that's an indication if the CO2 levels are high in an occupied classroom, that tells us that the ventilation system is either non-existent or it's not operating properly. It's not bringing in enough fresh air. And in some cases, we see the CO2 levels are really low, almost the same as outdoor air. And that's a flag to us to say that they're bringing in too much ventilation here. So you can save some energy by cutting back on your ventilation. So really, all of those items combined, no one item alone is enough to tell me how your building is operated. All of these items combined is what gives me a really good idea as how your building and how your systems are operating. And that's what I use to go back and do calculations, come up with scope of work, do calculations to determine the energy savings. And that's why we've been so successful and have had very few payouts, because of the thoroughness and the level of detail that we get into. And I'll add also that that our team up here in northern New England is known even within Honeywell as being the detail guys. When new employees in my position are brought into the company, they typically send them up here to go and do surveys with us, and they say, look, figure out how they do surveys, learn it, and repeat that when you come back to us, because they do view us as being very thorough, very detailed. We do things that other teams, even within Honeywell, don't do. And I think that involves rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. To me, there are a lot of people in my position who will go and survey buildings dressed like this with a clipboard, and we'll walk around, and what they can see from standing on the ground, we'll come up with a scope of work, and maybe look at Sean's computer. If I don't go home dirty, I haven't done a good job. I'm opening up air handling units, I'm crawling around in boiler rooms, I bring my step ladder, I'm up above ceilings, And
And I'll just add, and Bob won't say this, but two things. Bob's been recognized as the Solution Development of the Year for North America twice. So he's about as good as it comes for us. And there's a lot of people, in my opinion, that don't have the experience of design and then how it works in the practical side of operations. And so they can look at something and they may be able to look at a set of drawings, but they don't actually know how to apply how is it working in the space. And we have people like Bob and other people that can support the team that understand those two worlds. And in this day and age, that's a big difference. It's like the controls world. We've gone from conventional kind of pneumatics or electric controls to computerized ones, where it requires an IT tech and a mechanic to interact together, and two people versus one. The industry's changing a lot.
And
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't feel as though you answered my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So, winter, summer.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what I was trying to understand. Are
Right.
you measuring for a year to make your final recommendations, or, so you're extrapolating from one season to the next, or?
Correct. We typically would do it during the heating season. That's
Okay.
when you get the biggest bang for your buck as far as energy savings are concerned. I know you've got buildings that are air conditioned, and to some extent, sometimes we can hit it just right when you're surveying, that you can get part of the cooling season and a good chunk of the
Last
heating
week.
season. Yeah, exactly.
Last week,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah. So I would say start to finish, if you looked at both high schools collectively, 3 months. This is the most desirable time of the year to start auditing. Worst time, if you wouldn't have delayed, delay is actually a good thing as far as auditing. Starting an audit in the middle of the summer, not a great time to do it. There are reasons we want to kind of get back to, you got a fully air-conditioned buildings.
Mhm.
So there's things that maybe we want to wait and do some data logging when it starts to warm up, which we can incorporate and just validate some assumptions that he found. But I think probably 3 months, start to finish. In that duration, we'd have information that we want to share and get feedback on. And then if we...
Certainly enough to get started on. There's never, the lights, everybody knows,
And you're-
is probably
You're using historical, right, so you'll get all
Oh,
our
yeah.
historical records.
Electric
where they
bills.
did, right?
Correct.
Heating, cooling degree days.
We want to get a minimum of ideally 3 years worth of usage data, and then we want to figure out which year from a heating and cooling degree days that we use. And some of these assumptions are all things that we don't want to assume on our own. We want to make sure we get agreement with you guys on.
Okay.
Go back about, just talking about gross numbers per school, you have about 20 years of data.
And we have a very strong database, to be honest, that we use of looking at EUI, Energy Use Index. So you're basically looking at usage per square foot, so you normalize it on BTUs and you divide it by square footage. And of post-retrofit buildings, so high schools, middle schools, elementary schools in New Hampshire where we've done these projects. And Bob knows, usage per square foot, whether for a gas building or an oil building, where can we take you in a fully ventilated building or a non-fully ventilated building? So a lot of database here that gives us a guide around what's realistic and what's not. And we'll certainly use that in the process going forward if we're selected.
Okay.
Just one
What do we
quick,
call it?
I'm good.
one
Alright.
quick one. When you're doing your audits and you come back, do you ever consider solar as part of a solution?
We do. So to me, solar is a core measure that we evaluate across the board now. You have lots of options in solar. Interlakes is an example where they own it direct. It's really comes down to the state that you're working in, the opportunity, the moment in time you're at with incentives, your philosophy around, and do you want to borrow money and procure it, or do you want to go through, basically have somebody else do that and take risk? The industry changes a lot, not only in terms of application, but in terms of technology. I mean, you think of the solar space, battery technology is finally getting to a space at the time where you can justify it, and it's starting to emerge itself. So how you spec solar, how you procure it, how you fund it, are all different things that need to be analyzed. And we have extensive experience in doing just that. It's very common for us to evaluate solar on several different ways to procure it, and essentially put it in a summary and have a conversation, and you guys decide which is the best route. So yeah, solar, we have a strong bench, and that's one of the subject matter experts that we'd have, in addition to lighting and other things, is a solar person.
Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I have a handout of the presentation, if that's of interest.
Do you have an electronic version we can have?
I can send it to Sean electronically. And if you have a minute to watch the video,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
4 minutes to be.
Really
So I'm
wants
glad
us
you
to
could
watch
relate
this
to
video.
that. Well, it's not that earth-shattering, but no.
Oh, really? Is that
He
it?
gets the royalty payments.
We just saw that your battery is running low, so it's probably.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Thank you for
Take
listening.
care, folks. Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thanks for coming.
Good night.
Yeah, we'll take the paper copies off your hand too. I wasn't
Okay.
saying we didn't want those.
Happy to give them.
Thank you.
There's no reason for the yellow or black binder clip, so.
Okay, does Sean have one? Okay.
At the
Did you
very
get
end
one,
of that
Dan?
deck, I didn't highlight his details around the things that
There's
we
some
found at
extras.
South High School. There's a little more definition and scope.
Okay.
I didn't take the time to go through those.
Did you take an extra one?
Here.
Didn't know you were gonna send out electronic. Saves us
I
the color
wanted,
copies.
I wanted the yellow clip.
See you, have a good night.
Second one.
Yeah, give this extra one.
Give to Sean, yeah. He
He
won't
gets the
know.
black one.
I have black, two black.
Doesn't matter then.
He has nothing to train for, he can't do it.
There's more guys out there waiting.
One more
Grow
group.
down the whole gang. They get bigger, each group.
This one's bigger,
I think they're, I think so.
unless you mix, the two are mixed together, or?
Yep, 3, then 4, now we got 5.
Wow. So once I have to sit down by the cables.
I moved the cables.
Good man.
Hello.
Hi, come on in, guys, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us. I'm sure everybody's tired.
Yeah, what?
Is this where I'm gonna plug in?
Yes, there is your cord, which is
I appreciate you having us. We're gonna do some introductions in a minute, but I'm Glenn Ritchie.
Get yourself set up.
Here, one of you can sit down here if you want.
Yeah.
Here's your.
I'll pass a few around. I've got a couple extra if you need them. I'll give you a pile of cards if you're interested.
Well, thanks for giving up your Wednesday, it's Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Your Thursday night. This is my 7th meeting of the week, I think.
Last on your agenda,
For this
and
weekend.
you get to go to bed after this, right?
Well, I hope
So
so.
there's a sign-up sheet.
You go to Maine.
Start down towards the end.
Supposed to go to Maine. My friend ended up in the hospital, so
It's not good. Probably not a good idea to go to Maine.
probably not a good idea
I'd
to go to
stay
Maine.
away from Maine.
Yeah, stay. I said to him, I can only imagine calling his wife and say, we're in the hospital.
Everyone's got a different way of hooking up.
You
Yeah,
got it.
I was noticing that.
That's amazing, all three.
People have.
Some have wireless.
Pull adapters out of their pockets.
Good luck with that. Sometimes it works. Yep. I have an adapter. I've had success with my adapter also.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Huh?
Screen kind of,
Oh, it changed, it was blue before.
Yeah.
Did it show up and then go away?
the screen, yeah, the screen was up. and
Was it
then-
up? There it is.
Yeah,
There we go.
maybe it just was asleep.
No, I didn't lose my marbles either. That's, I'm not having another kid. That's my granddaughter.
Cute.
I'm sure that some of you probably have some grandkids too.
Sure. Not yet. My wife is hoping soon.
Your wife, good luck. Your daughters.
Yeah. There you go.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're not gonna get the contract just by showing us pretty pictures.
No, I get
So,
that.
may as well start.
Yeah. So we appreciate you taking the time today. I thank you for the opportunity and how we might help you in terms of partnership in achieving your capital improvement goals, your energy savings, your financial objectives. We feel, from a performance contracting perspective, we're a leader in this space. In the RFQ response, I think you'll find that our preliminary analysis came up with energy usage potential savings across the two high schools to the tune of approximately $1 million. So you can potentially monetize those operational savings and use it for various capital improvements that you're looking to initiate within the high schools. At least in
Over
that
what
first
period
phase.
of time?
Over what period of time?
$1 million savings.
Yeah, that's an annual basis.
Okay,
So, yeah,
thank
yeah. The term could vary depending upon how you elect to finance it. Yeah, and I guess I should have said too, we can certainly make this interactive as we go. I know we've allotted 20 minutes for a presentation and 20 minutes for Q&A, but how have you folks been doing this? More interactive?
Yeah, it's been
Is
a
that your
little,
preference? Okay.
different for each one.
We're friendly.
That's fine. I get that. So again, so kudos to you folks in terms of what you've done, to date in terms of maintaining the facility. You've done an awesome job, based on the preliminary walkthrough that we've done and the work to date.
They all say that, I didn't pay them anything.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there thinking that, Sean.
Well, I was thinking.
Is there a script
I've been on
now?
the board for 10 years. I was taking credit for that.
Maybe the board president should be taking credit.
You guys. So here's your local team. You've got myself, Glenn Ritchie, I'm the account executive, so you can look at me as kind of a point of coordination. You've got Stephen Bodie. He's, pardon me?
No, I just.
He's my manager. You got Gary Reif, he's our engineering manager. You can see we're all part of the Energy Solutions Group within Johnson Controls. You've got Dana McGovern down here on my left at the end. He's our operations manager. And Anthony Marciano, performance assurance engineer, so that becomes important in terms of the measurement and verification phase, right? And two gentlemen unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. Victor Holt, he's a construction manager. He's out hunting ducks this week on vacation, and Dave had another commitment, so he wasn't able to attend. He's our service manager. I think the key takeaways here, for you in particular, is the local aspect of the team. This team is a pretty cohesive group, done a lot of projects in the Northeast, New Hampshire specifically as well. So I think that's important from a communication aspect and being able to work well together, make sure that projects finish on time and on budget. I think that's real key. You also see too that there's some global expertise around this piece, right? So this gets beyond the local community aspect in terms of things we do, but being a big company like ours, we can leverage that expertise even on a worldwide basis and bring that to bear on a local basis. So it can rear its head in terms of some of our advanced solutions. For example, Trigen, and we'll get into that in a bit, but that's one of the recommended items from our analysis, right? So we've done a lot in that space, as well as energy storage. So those will give you some examples in terms of the advanced solutions that we can kind of bring to bear. We're committed to safety, which is important as well. You don't want any safety issues to occur throughout the project that kind of derail it and take it off track.
Seamless project delivery, I kind of mentioned and alluded to that already as well. My view is a tight-knit group that can work well with you in terms of long-term partnership, because that's what the performance contract is. You know, these things are typically 15 to 20-year terms. So, I hope, if we are in the right to move forward with you, we'd like to move beyond just, long-term partnership, but hopefully become a trusted advisor in the space for the school district. I already mentioned the advanced solutions piece. So that's kind of who we are. I know I kind of went through my setup mode, but I can see your name tags, but make sure we get everybody lined up. You're Dan,
Dan?
right? You're COO?
COO?
Got it. Howard?
Yes.
Robert? Sean?
He doesn't have a nameplate. We're still working on that.
All right, Mr. Farrington? And are you just the recorder?
Not just the recorder.
Okay,
He's our guy.
all right. Cool. What's your name?
Frank.
Hi, Frank.
By the way, you're live tonight.
Pardon me?
You're live tonight.
Oh, uh-oh. This
Hundreds-
isn't
hundreds
recorded,
of
and then
fans out
you
there.
you can't edit this?
You do,
No,
well, we can do that
live stream.
subsequently.
Best behavior.
All across to
That's
10 or
fine.
20 houses.
But they're vocal houses.
Yes, they can be.
All they're gonna see is the back of my head. No, I'm kidding. So, this is a bit of a busy slide, so what I've done on this one is kind of draw out some things that I think would be key for you folks from a value perspective and what would be important to you. So ethics is a big thing with Johnson Controls. It's a job-ending kind of thing when we violate it as employees, so I think that's really important. Another that you drew out in your RFQ, your request for qualifications, is NAESCO crediting, so North America ESCOs, and accreditation. So we've got the highest level in this space, and I think there's only 8 companies that have achieved that rating, which I think would be important. Kind of speaks to the space we live in. Innovation, we've been around a long time, and we've got a substantial line card in terms of products that can be used where appropriate within specific projects. But we bring that innovation around and to your advantage, so that can come to play from a favorable perspective on your end in terms of pricing and cost structure of the project. Things that we can leverage there. And we're a leader in the space, specifically in things that I already mentioned before, and so I won't get too redundant, but we've got a lot of advanced solutions out there, and given your specific project needs and what you're looking to do from a facility improvement perspective, you may be able to take advantage of some of that. So to me, this is our commitment to your mission, right? It's not about us, it's about partnering with you to reach your objectives. And we kind of get the space you live in, right? It's all about your kids, your faculty, your staff, your constituents, right, in terms of funding substantial projects. If you can put together a financial mechanism that comes at this in a little bit, let's say, budget neutral kind of way, and their financing options, we'll get into those later, but if you can avoid maybe general obligation bonds, and take other financing mechanisms and put those into the works, you can make this a net neutral kind of impact on your budget, and it can also affect tax levies, tax rates, and things of that nature that might be passed on to taxpayers that live in Nashua. A couple other items that should stand out here for you. The numbers are big in terms of localized presence, in terms of Johnson Control in your space, to the tune of 140 or so employees in this area. We've been around a long time in the New Hampshire area as well as nationally, which I already mentioned. And then that one in the middle I think is important. We've done a lot in terms of projects that we've completed in the Northeast region, and you see the $1.3 billion, that's guaranteed energy savings over the terms of these projects, right? That's not an annual number. But I would think it's big in terms of project as well as savings that we're producing here around performance contracting, and I think you can certainly leverage that to meet your objectives as well. Yeah, I think another thing that's important too is a very strong balance sheet, right? The size of the company, I think, is important in helping you meet your objectives. You called it out in your RFQ. I'm thinking that you're familiar with performance contract and the guaranteed savings aspect. You know, Johnson Controls isn't in the business to write checks, but they'll do it, you know, if the performance guarantee is missed. But, you know, that kind of speaks to the stability of the balance sheet, though, too, right? And the size of the company, because, you know, we can support those savings if need be and write those checks if it occurs. So, you know, this is about your district, right? So this isn't, you know, your objectives are really our direction. I extracted some things from your base RFQ that kind of resonated to me. The financial stability of our company. You know, improved occupant comfort and indoor air quality. The long-term cost savings and savings guarantee I mentioned, and being able to support that from a financial stability perspective. The local cohesive and experienced team, I think that's important. If you're looking to do things within the New Hampshire area, you want a team that's worked well together, done a number of projects together, and can bring that same kind of expertise to bear in terms of what you're looking to do. Then the ASCO accreditation, I already mentioned that as well as the advanced solutions. And you know, some other things that I think are important on the right. You know, we look at this as a long-term partnership, right? You also mentioned things like incurring no initial capital cost, which, you know, we can certainly meet as well. Reduced maintenance needs, and you saw it in the ASCO accreditation. STEM, I think you didn't call that out directly in your RFQ, but we can augment that. We have an academy that focuses on this specific aspect and helping to augment the curriculum you have within the school district. So we can be, you know, fit and dovetail well with that STEM-based curriculum. So we could have our folks, as part of the process, if you elect to partner with us, become, you know, part of that curriculum and allow some of your students to have that hands-on kind of interaction with our team along the way. So I think that would be another important aspect.
So are
Go ahead.
there any, we have career technical education programs.
Mhm.
So are there opportunities for internships? Or when you say participate, you're doing the audit, you bring the kids out and show them how it's done?
Right, but we can also fit it within the curriculum. There's different ways we can come at it, right? We can have the hands-on experience where they can kind of become part and shadow the project, right? So that's a good hands-on learning experience. But we can also fit into the curriculum as well. So we could work with folks in your district that structure that curriculum and see how we could best augment it. I would look at it as something that we could supplement and augment in a couple different ways. Any other questions on that? Okay. To me, the key here is seamless, right? Streamlined project delivery. You know, making sure that we're on time in terms of delivery and on budget, which are kind of some of the key points that I've highlighted on this slide. You know, so the partnership to me is it's a construction of many members. Johnson Controls is only one part of that. So you obviously have folks on your end that are going to want to weigh in and be part of this whole process. And so you'll certainly do that. Subcontractors, engineers, suppliers, we do as much as possible to leverage some of the local presence. And I'll let folks on the team in a bit, or even now if you want to interject, kind of speak to kind of what we do in that space. But we'll bring that to bear as well and try and get folks in the local community involved. And you know, the project plan that you're looking at in the lower right, there's a lot of stuff there, but your takeaway from that to me is comprehensiveness. It's a living document. There's a lot of elements to it, correct, but it keeps us on track so that we do achieve that on time, on budget completion of your project, which I think would be important to all parties.
So scope management, so is there mission creep or not? How do you prevent it?
I'll let one of these guys talk to that.
Sure. So when you say scope management, you mean upfront during development, or you mean during construction?
You know, scoping out front, up front, this is what we're going to do.
Sure.
How do you ensure that it doesn't, you know, get waylaid?
Yeah, well, so I think there's two parts to that. Is one is you know, part of this is interactive, right? It's us in the industry working with you to meet your needs, what you are looking for. And so it's a collaborative approach in terms of the development of the project to a certain extent, with us bringing our expertise. As we get further along in the process and we start to gain more knowledge in terms of financials, cost savings, you know, that picture starts to get molded a little bit better, and we can continue to kind of mold and creep. So as we go through the different iterations, it's going to basically provide that funnel, which is going to get us to a project that satisfactorily accomplishes your goals and at the same time is accomplished through the savings mechanism.
Well, projects never seem to go the way, I mean, they start off one way and somehow they divert or whatever. So the change process is a structured, I see, change management plan. So that everything is documented, everything is approved.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then especially once we get into construction, which Dana can speak to.
I think I'd like to emphasize that my project management team is involved and contributing from the get-go of the project. So when we're early on in developing, before we've even developed a full project, the construction managers and myself are there on site with Gary's engineers developing the project. So when we get down to the implementation phase, there tends to be little to zero scope creep, because we've kind of bridged all of those gaps that you would otherwise find.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions before I move on? So financing, I kind of mentioned this a few slides back. And not that I'm going to make a big financial discussion here, but there are various options. We'll help you navigate those, right? I kind of mentioned tax exempt lease purchase is an option. You could bond. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter where you get your cash from, right? You could use your general fund, whatever you like to do. But we can help you navigate some of those waters, as well as in the lower right, grants, rebates, various incentives that might be applied for certain facility improvement measures. We can help you get through that as well, right? So that'll help reduce the overall project cost and whatever additional amount you might be financing or paying for. So we'll certainly help in that area as well.
And when it comes to the grants, rebates, do you know about those as you're putting the plan together, or do they come up as you're working on it?
As we're putting the plan together. In fact, a lot of them are pretty well known already, right? So as you develop a project for the high schools and you have certain measures that you're looking and agreed upon that we're going to implement, and we would already know beforehand that there are various rebates and incentives associated with those, and help you get out in front of those. I can't mention the local pieces enough. I think we've got great local presence right in this New Hampshire area. The team's been working extremely well together for a number of years. You'll have more in the request for qualification document that we supplied, but I drew out a couple, one on the left that's specific to New Hampshire, and then the one on the right with Chelmsford, Mass, not too far from here. To me, that one more closely parallels the size and scope of what you're looking to do. For example, Chelmsford was a roughly 1 million square feet between town facilities and schools. And when you're talking your two schools as being the initial phase, you come in roughly around 1 million square feet. So I thought that was a good parallel to put up there, even though it's not, let's say, in the New Hampshire area. And now, I would, you can read these as well as I can, but I think the key outcomes for both of them, and in fact, I think all the references that we supplied in the RFQ, these are completed on schedule, on budget. Pretty significant saving dollars in terms of total guarantee, and we didn't pay, anything against the guarantee. In other words, we didn't screw up, right? We met our goal and objective. And then the one on the left there for Claremont, the last bullet item on the key outcomes, kind of goes back to an earlier point I mentioned, that will help you navigate and go about securing some of those grants and incentives to reduce the overall project cost.
So do you have a, what percent do you typically have to pay out? Do you have any idea what that number is, say in Northeast?
As far as what we've paid, I don't know that number. Do you? If not, we can,
Not offhand.
we can get back to you.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to know that.
You just
And-
look- bless you.
And then, the other would be, I'm guessing, since if you have a low number that you're not paying out, it often people are overshooting, right? I mean, I assume Chelmsford, there's some dollars they're getting that you didn't guarantee, right? Is that
Right, that's correct.
how that works? Okay, so I'd be curious to see overall what kind of percentage you have for that as well.
We're exceeding the guarantee?
Right.
Yeah. So I can get you that stuff.
Because you'll pay if you don't reach the guarantee. but
Correct.
Then there's the amount over that, which we would assume you would reach an amount over the guarantee, or you're
Sure.
kind of calling it pretty close, right?
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
like our budget.
Right.
Come June.
Ours is like that all the time. Well, you don't have to run the same way.
You're looking for the plus and minuses. And
Yeah.
The difference is they're a $1.3 billion company, they could just get the money from the company.
Or the market.
Get more than
So, how long would I guess a complete audit is something that would be recommended by you guys?
An investment grade audit before you proceed with anything, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a typical part of an ESCO kind of process, and moving into a performance contract that we do that, in fact.
Yeah,
Barry,
it's
go
usually
ahead.
about 90 days, 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would the cost approximately be?
I think we called it out in the RFQ.
Okay.
We gave you an estimate around $42,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it was like a nickel a square foot.
That's for each school?
No, that was total, I
Combined.
think, across both schools.
And that,
Nickel per square foot, doesn't matter how many schools.
I hear you. But my head is not calculating much tonight.
and that fee we pay, even if like, if we decide to do a bunch of projects, is there any credit towards the fact that we were gonna do we pay for the audit?
Yeah, I mean, so,
And I know I can look this up in the RFQ.
yeah, it gets absorbed. I mean, let's say you do the IGA, and there's that cost associated with it. You know, if you walk, if you bail and don't proceed with us, then you would pay that fee. If you elect to go further with us into contract, it becomes enveloped into the project. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. So this is pretty much, it's close to my last slide. So I'm just going to sum up a few points that I've kind of been making all along the way. I think, Sean, you outlined, you started with 9, you've boiled it down to 3, and everybody's kind of very similar. So you're looking for the value add and differentiation piece in terms of what's Johnson Controls going to bring to the table that's going to be different than the next potential partner. I think the breadth, the size, number of projects we've done, the scope of the projects, the savings that we've developed across the Northeast, you'll find us to be a vendor-neutral partner. Yeah, we've got a big line card, we've got products that we can bring to bear where it makes sense, but we're not a rip and replace partner, where we're going to try and push equipment and gear where it doesn't make sense. We can certainly recommend, and then as a team kind of decide what makes sense from your perspective. So that vendor neutrality, I think, is important.
So if I may,
Go ahead.
in
Sure.
that respect, so new air handler somewhere, you would help put a bid together to get a competitive price for that?
Yes.
Based on different vendors?
You got it.
That's part of what you do?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And at times, you might find that there's something within our line card, right? Specific products that we have. You can, if it's something we're manufacturing, you could take advantage of some cost structure there, right, in the pricing. So that could be important. And then on time, on budget, I mentioned that. I think, as I said, you've got a real strong team here with these guys. I mean, I'm not the engineer or the construction manager or the operations manager, but these guys have worked together for a long period of time, a great, number of projects, and they can bring that capability to bear on the school district and help you achieve on time, on budget goals. The financial strength of the company in itself, I already mentioned this, we are a big company, but the benefit to you there is our balance sheet is strong. And especially when you're getting into performance guarantee kind of space where, if we do have to write a check, we can write the check, right, to cover whatever shortfall we might have had. Advanced solutions, I mentioned that. Where it's appropriate, Tri-Gen is one of the recommendations we've made, Tri-Generation, right? Heat, cooling, and electricity. So we've done a lot of good work in that space. The safety piece, I think, is really important to this mix, as well as effective communications, right? To ensure that the thing stays on track, to your point, Howard, and that you don't have a shift in terms of project completion and commissioning. And that dedicated local team. I think, that those are probably the big strengths that we're bringing to the table. So I'll kind of,
I have
go
another
ahead.
question, if I may.
Sure.
You've brought up safety several times, so I'm curious why. I mean, I once worked for an environmental consulting firm, and we did the OSHA site audit, so I'm kind of familiar with what that could entail. So you're not when you say safety, you're talking about the people you bring on site, your
safety,
guys?
Yeah, our guys. Our
Okay.
Safety at Johnson Controls is second to none. I mean, it's probably the pillar of our business, and, I would think any place that we work or facility, you want to have a company that's safe practices, lockout, tag out,
Yep.
Ladder safety, everything, so that, students don't get hurt, faculty don't get hurt. I mean, we're really big on
And I think it's
safety.
an important for the people. I mean, you are being broadcast, like we
Sure.
said, so I think it's important for people to understand that.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's say you came into one of our high schools. I know sometimes you need to be there during the day because you need the CO2, and I've learned a lot tonight from the people that have been here. But are you generally doing your work, I mean, they obviously schedule it with Sean, maybe a lot of times during the summer when there are fewer kids. I mean, I don't know how that works. So safety is, especially when kids are around, obviously for your own workers, that
Sure.
they're not overreaching on a ladder. We don't want anybody to get hurt. So I'm just curious, how do you accommodate busy school? We have kids in high schools until 10 o'clock at night. So how does that work into a typical schedule where you, at least for the audit part, let's just deal with that.
For the audit part, I can speak to that. We try to work, if there's like days off or school days that the kids have off, that's a good time for us to come in, and we try to work around that kind of schedule. But when we do like our monitoring, like the CO2, we put our loggers out and things like that, we like to have the school active. So we prefer especially we're heading into a great season to get some good trending data, because as the temperatures get colder, it becomes more, the temperature differentials get greater, so you can kind of see if things are scheduled or they're setting back and that kind of thing. So we like an active school, but we will use, if there's times off, days off, we can do that. We have to work with the custodial staff and the people that are working in the buildings too. So we want to accommodate their schedules as well. But I think the other piece on that is usually there's a point of contact that we work with in a school district, where we schedule everything through that point of contact. Let them know when we're coming, who's going to be there, what areas we need to see. We try to cover all that and make sure we communicate well in that regard.
So I'm curious, how many days on, say, one high school?
Yeah.
How many days would you actually be actively working in and around the building, and then you go back, you have your data loggers, you run that for some period of time,
Yeah.
and then you start crunching and you come up with a report, and it's about 3 months. So I'm just curious, how much is on site, how much is processing at the back end until you finally produce that report?
Well, a lot of it is we go in initially and we want to see pretty much everything in the school. We'll go in with an initial audit, and then that's when we'll do the data loggers, put those stuff out in the beginning. And then what we do is we come back, and if there's mechanical upgrades, things that require engineering and stuff like that, scope development, we get back and we write the scopes, get that thing written out. That usually takes a couple weeks to get that all set up, getting the scopes written, and then we walk. What we'll do then is we'll put that out to different contractors to get different bids, and then they have to come back to us with the different bids for things like lighting, things like weatherization, a few water systems here, whatever. A lot of these other kind of measures, we would have them specific vendors come through and walk through those different areas, and to get the pricing for that kind of stuff. So So it's really, in the beginning, it's scope writing, it's evaluating the building, scope writing, and then the second phase really is getting the scopes written and getting the bids to come in, and then assimilating all that into a report and then putting it out. So there's a lot of upfront walkthroughs, but then as the project progresses, then it's more, we'll be writing a report and putting everything together kind of thing.
I have one last question.
Sure.
Thank you. Are you guys dedicated, or, I mean, are you,
Sorry, that just came up.
No, not as people and as
They're
professionals,
here
I
in the
don't
city
mean
of
that.
Nashua at 8:30 at night.
In other words, I know how it is in big companies where people are on multiple projects and things like that. So you are a team, you cover a large, so you have, I'm guessing you are the managers and you have groups of people that work within each of your departments.
That's correct.
And do those guys tend to stick with the project from front to back?
Yes.
Or at least through whatever the first phase is? Yeah, okay.
Cradle to grave.
Thank you. We're not burying anybody.
Not yet, right?
No, we, I would rather call it a rebirth.
Any other last questions?
So we've been familiar with hiring an architect, hire a construction manager, ending up with a guaranteed maximum price. Is there anything like that in performance contracting? Because we've sat down and given us all the energy measures
Right.
and what they should cost to do.
Right.
Do we arrive at some point where we could say our contract with you is not going to exceed a certain number? Do you ever deal with any of that?
Like fixed price, not to exceed?
Yes. Yeah. See, in the construction world, they have guaranteed maximum price.
Right.
And they guarantee, they have their own contingency,
Right.
which actually we own, but they keep it, because there's always something that arises that's unforeseen.
Yeah.
And then we have our own contingency. So I'm just wondering if you operate off that same principle.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
All right, kind of tied into that, we talked about the guarantees, and if you don't reach the guarantee, you pay us back. So let's say we're gonna finance one of these deals
Mm-hmm.
through my annual operating budget. You're gonna guarantee me, let's say, $100,000 in savings.
Right.
If I don't get my 100,000,
Right.
is it like a 5 years till you send me this check,
No.
or?
No.
Well, because I have a limited amount of time. I need it by the end of July, okay?
You've got an operating budget, you need to fill that gap.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, it's not that long.
Well, I just
No.
want to ask the question.
No, in fact, maybe you can shed some light on the
Sure.
measurement and verification process, because that kind of dovetails with that kind of true-up you're talking
Right,
about, right?
right.
You commission the project, you've got the construction phase, you commission it, now you're live, now you want to measure from that point, right? Make sure 12 months out that you're making that,
Yeah,
that guarantee,
100,000 is
right?
right.
So there is a process associated with it. Maybe Anthony can shed a little bit of light around it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the way that the M&V annual guarantee works is it's an annual guarantee, so it's squared up at the end of a year, right? We're not looking at, we're definitely tracking it over the course of the year, but as we get to a certain point, we can see.
Calendar year?
We call it a guarantee year, so basically from the date that the work is done, we start the years
So
from there.
substantial completion.
Exactly, exactly. Now, we can be a little flexible, and in a lot of cases we are, because we'll align with different fiscal years for
Yeah,
different.
we'd want to tie it to our fiscal.
Exactly. And so we get to the end of the year and we realize, okay, hey, we're short $20,000 based off our measurements and reporting. I can have a check in your hand within a week.
And in most
I like that.
instances, Anthony's gonna know well in advance that
Right.
we're not gonna obtain our savings. So we can prepare and plan for that.
Start giving some of your own paycheck back to the. It's guaranteed.
It was only that.
Alright, so, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
That's it, you're
Sorry-
good?
Sorry you had to be
Okay, yeah.
the last round here, but
I
glad
appreciate
that you
your
were able
time.
to come in.
They asked for it to be last.
You did?
Yeah,
Okay.
we had somebody that was running late, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So it worked out well for us.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your
Guys,
time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And can we get a copy of the,
Electronic copy of the
presentation,
presentation,
Sure.
Sean?
so we can send out.
I will send it to you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Don't forget your adapter.
No. I won't be doing much without
Roosevelt,
that.
nice to meet you, thanks.
Given the hour, I have no interest in
Pondering.
debate here, so I'll just entertain a motion at this point.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, pleasure meeting you.
Appreciate
Good night, guys.